The phone rang at 7:43 in the morning, 3 days after we buried my husband of 41 years. I know the exact time because I was standing in the kitchen holding his coffee mug, the blue one with the chipped handle he refused to let me throw away, and I watched the clock on the microwave blink to 7:44 while my son's name lit up my screen for the 4th time that week. I let it ring, not because I was grieving, though I was, not because I couldn't find the words, though those were hard to come by. I let it ring because I already knew what my son was going to say, and I wasn't ready to pretend I didn't. My name is Margaret. I am 67 years old. I was a registered nurse for 32 years. Raised 2 children mostly on my own while my husband traveled for work. Kept a household running through 3 recessions, 2 surgeries, and 1 cancer scare that turned out to be nothing but still aged me 10 years in a single waiting room. I know how to read a situation. I'm made for the teller others, and down this scares and betters. I know when someone is calling to check on you and when someone is calling to manage you. My son David had stopped calling to check on me sometime around the time he married Karen. I want to be fair. I have always tried to be fair about Karen. She is organized, efficient, and she loves my son in her way. She makes color-coded spreadsheets for their vacation budgets, and she sends Christmas cards before Thanksgiving, and she has never once shown up to a family dinner without a dish that took her 4 hours to prepare. These are not small things, but somewhere between the spreadsheets and the color coding, she began to apply that same organizational efficiency to people. To me, specifically, I had noticed it in small ways over the years. The way she would speak for David during family conversations, filling in his pauses before he could find his own words. The way she referred to my house as the property when they visited, walking through rooms with the quiet assessment of someone calculating square footage. The way she once mentioned, casually, over a Sunday dinner, that the neighborhood had appreciated considerably since my husband and I had bought in 1987. I filed these things away. I didn't say anything. That has always been my way. Not weakness, not submission, just patience. I have learned over a long life that the people who talk the most are rarely the ones who see the most. My husband Robert understood this about me. He used to say, I had the stillest eyes of anyone he'd ever met. He meant it as a compliment. I took it as one. I called David back at 9 that morning. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, where Robert and I had eaten breakfast together for 40 years, and I dialed. He answered on the first ring, Mom. His voice had that particular quality I had come to recognize, the careful, slightly lowered register of a man who has rehearsed what he's about to say. How are you holding up? I'm all right, I said. Getting through it. Good. That's good. A pause. Karen and I have been talking. I waited. We're worried about you being alone in that house. It's a lot to manage. 4 bedrooms. That yard Dad used to take care of so much of it. And now, I managed this house before your father retired, I said. I managed it when he was traveling 40 weeks a year. I know, Mom. I know you did. But that was different. You were younger. There it was. That word, younger. The quiet verdict that gets handed down to women of a certain age, as if it explains everything and justifies anything. We think you should consider something smaller. David continued. There's a really beautiful community about 20 minutes from us. Independent living, but with support available if you need it. Karen toured it last week. She said it's lovely. Karen had already toured it. I held the phone and looked out the window at the backyard. Robert's tomato garden was still there, the cages rusting slightly at the tops, the soil turned over for winter. He had planted those beds the spring. After his first retirement attempt, he tried twice before it finally took, and he had grown tomatoes every summer since. Last August, he had brought me a bowl of them, warm from the sun, and we had eaten them standing at the counter with nothing but salt. I appreciate your concern, I said. Let me think about it. Of course. Take your time. Another pause. I was also going to ask, I know this isn't great timing, and I'm sorry for that, but Dad's estate attorney called me. there are some things that need to be sorted out, and Karen thought it might make sense if we had a family meeting to talk through everything while it's fresh. While it was fresh. Robert had been in the ground for 72 hours. Sure, I said. Let's plan something. I hung up and sat there for a long time with my cold coffee. Then I went to the small desk in the corner of the bedroom, Robert's desk, the one he'd had since before we were married, and I opened the bottom left drawer, the one with the small brass lock, and I took out a folder. I had been sitting with this folder for almost 3 years. Since the summer, Robert's health began to turn, when the good days started being outnumbered by the harder ones, and we both knew, without saying it out loud, what that meant. We had talked, then really talked, the way you talk when the clock becomes audible about what came after. What I would need, what I would want, what no one else needed to know about. Robert had believed, with a quiet stubbornness I always admired, that a woman's financial life was her own private business. He had grown up watching his mother defer every money decision to his father, watching her left without orientation or resources when his father died young, and he had sworn he would never allow that to happen to me. So for the last decade of our marriage, alongside everything else, he had been building something, a small condominium in Savannah, Georgia, purchased 12 years ago when prices were still gentle, paid off 8 years later, sitting in my name and my name alone on a deed that had never come up at a Sunday dinner or a family meeting or a phone call from my son. Robert's idea. His gift. His way of saying, no matter what happens, you have somewhere to go that is only yours. I had never told David. I had never told my daughter Elaine, who lived in Portland and called more often but listened less carefully. I had never mentioned it to Karen, who would have had thoughts. I had kept it the way Robert intended it to be kept, quietly, privately, as a thing belonging only to me. The family meeting happened on a Saturday. David and Karen drove down. Elaine called in from Portland, her face slightly pixelated on the laptop screen. Karen sat up at the head of the dining room table, as if she were running a board meeting. There was a spreadsheet. Of course there was a spreadsheet. Karen had itemized the house, its estimated value, its annual maintenance costs, property taxes, utilities. She had researched the independent living community and printed out a brochure. She had, I noted, also printed a page of comparables for homes in my neighborhood. The sold prices highlighted in yellow. I sat at my own dining room table and watched my daughter-in-law present a PowerPoint about my future. The main thing, Karen said, in the careful tone of someone being very kind, is that you shouldn't be carrying all of this alone. The house is a lot. The finances are a lot. David and I want to help. We can be involved in managing things, making sure bills are paid, helping with decisions. I've been managing my own bills since 1982, I said. Of course you have. She smiled the smile. But things are different now. And honestly, Margaret, it would just give us all peace of mind. Peace of mind. That phrase did a lot of heavy lifting in that conversation. My son sat across from me and said almost nothing. He nodded at the right moments and looked at his hands at the others. I had raised David to be kind, and he was kind, genuinely. But kindness without backbone tends to flow in the direction of the nearest strong current. Karen was a strong current. Elaine, from her pixelated square in Portland, said she thought the independent living idea sounded really positive and that she'd been reading about how community is so important for emotional health after loss. She had been reading. She had not been calling or visiting, but she had been reading. I looked at my children, one on a screen, one looking at his hands, and I thought about the 40 years I had given to this family, the night shifts I had worked to help pay for David's college when Robert's company had a bad year, the drives to Portland I had made when Elaine was going through her divorce and needed someone to sit with her in the dark, the Christmases, the school plays, the broken arms and broken hearts and broken cars I had helped put back together, all of it, every ordinary, extraordinary piece of it. And here we were in my own dining room with a brochure for a place I didn't ask to go. I'll think about everything you've said, I told them. I genuinely will. That was in December. By March, I had thought about it. What I had decided was not what they expected. In January, I called the property management company in Savannah. I had been keeping the condo rented for several years, a quiet supplemental income that I deposited into an account in my name, which I used for things I never mentioned to anyone. New books, a trip to see an old friend in Santa Fe, a good coat, small private luxuries of a life that was mine. The tenant had been planning to leave at the end of February, and I told the management company not to find a new one. In February, I called a woman named Patricia, who had been my closest friend since we were nurses together at the hospital 30 years ago. She had retired and moved to Savannah herself 6 years back, and she was the only person outside my marriage who had known about the condo from the beginning. We had talked several times since Robert died, and she had said, more than once in her direct way, "Margaret, you know what to do. You've always known what to do." She was right. I had known since December. In March, I began going through the house. Quietly, methodically, the way I had done everything my whole life. I sorted Robert's things with the care they deserved. Some to David, some to Elaine, some to the donation center on Route 9, some kept for myself because certain things are not negotiable. I sold a few pieces of furniture I had never loved. I kept the kitchen table. I kept the blue mug with the chipped handle. I didn't tell anyone I was doing any of this. I did not call a realtor. I did not list anything. I simply prepared. In the same quiet way, Robert had built me a place to go, with patience, with intention, without announcing it to anyone who would have opinions. In April, David called on a Sunday afternoon. He sounded guilty before he spoke, which told me Karen was nearby. "Mom, I don't want this to come out wrong." A breath. "But we've been talking, and we're both worried that you're not really moving forward, that you're just sitting in that house and not making any decisions. Karen thinks, and I think, that it might be better for everyone if we helped you move the process along." "What process?" I asked. "The house. We think you should put it on the market, Mom, before summer. It's a good time to sell. The market is really..." "David." "Yeah. Have I ever asked you to make a decision for me?" Silence. "No," he said finally. "But thank you for calling," I said. "I'll be in touch soon." 2 weeks later, I finished packing. Not frantically, not in distress, with the quiet efficiency of someone who has known exactly where she was going for months and has simply been waiting for the right moment to go. I arranged for a moving company to take the things I was keeping to Savannah. I donated the rest. I called a woman from my church who had been looking for a starter home and gave her the name of the realtor I'd already quietly spoken to, and I told her she'd be hearing from him. Then I wrote 2 letters, one to David, one to Elaine. I did not write them in anger. I wrote them in the same still, clear voice I had used all my life for things that mattered. I told them that I loved them. I told them that I understood they meant well, mostly. I told them that their father had spent the last decade of his life making sure I would always have a place that was mine, and that I was honoring his love for me by using it. I told them where I was going. I gave them the address and my new phone number and the name of a local doctor I had already chosen. I told them they were welcome to visit. On reasonable notice. I did not tell them the condo had been paid off for 8 years. Some things are still private. I drove out of that driveway on a Tuesday morning in May. The dogwood in the front yard was blooming. It bloomed every year the second week of May, without fail. The kind of dependability that feels like a small promise the world keeps making. I sat in the car for a moment and looked at it. Then I looked at the house. 40 years of living in those walls. 40 years of noise and exhaustion and joy and ordinary grace. I thought about Robert telling me I had the stillest eyes he'd ever seen. I pulled out of the driveway, and I didn't look back. Patricia was waiting at the condo with takeout from a place on the river and a bottle of the good wine she'd been saving since I told her the date. We sat on the small balcony as the sun went down over the water. And we talked about Robert and about getting older and about what it means to belong to yourself when everyone around you has decided you belong to them. "You know David is going to be upset," she said. "He'll be confused first," I said. "Then upset. Then he'll understand." How long for the understanding part? I thought about my son, kind, decent, easily steered, genuinely loving underneath all the noise his wife made. Give him a year, I said. Maybe less. I was right about that too. He called 10 days after I left. Not the managed, rehearsed call, a real one. His voice uncertain in the way it used to be when he was 17 and didn't know how to say what he meant. Mom, I didn't know you had a place there. I know. How long? 12 years. A long pause. Dad knew. Your father built it for me, I said. It was his idea. Another pause. Longer. I could hear him breathing through something. Are you okay? Are you actually okay there? I am more okay than I have been in a long time, I said. And this was the complete truth. He came down in June. Without Karen. Which was his own decision. And one I respected him for. He stayed 3 days. Slept on the pull-out in the second bedroom. Ate breakfast with me at the small table by the window that looks out toward the water. On the second morning, he asked me why I hadn't told him about the condo before. And I thought about the answer for a long time before I gave it to him. Because it wasn't yours to know, I said. Not harshly. Just honestly. There are parts of a woman's life that belong to her, that don't require an explanation or a permission or a family meeting. Your father understood that. I hope someday you will too. He looked at his coffee for a while. Then he looked up. I'm sorry about the spreadsheet, he said. I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere you forgot was still there. Tell Karen I appreciate the effort, I said. She's thorough. He smiled at that. My son has his father's smile. It's one of the better things in the world. Elaine took longer. She sent a long email full of words like blindsided and communication and healthy processing. I responded with 3 sentences. I told her I loved her. I told her I was well. I told her the door was open when she was ready to walk through it without an agenda. She came at Thanksgiving. We made a small dinner. Patricia joined us. And one of my neighbors, a woman named Ruth, who had moved to Savannah the same year I was planning to, and had somehow become exactly the kind of friend you find in your 7th decade if you're lucky. Elaine sat across from Ruth at the table, and within 20 minutes they were talking about books. And by dessert, something had shifted in her face. The careful, evaluated concern giving way to something simpler. After dinner, she came and stood beside me at the kitchen window while I washed dishes. This is a good life, Mom, she said. It is, I agreed. I didn't know you'd built this. Your father and I built it together. Quietly. She was quiet for a moment. I think I understand why you didn't tell us. I think you do, I said. The holidays passed. The new year came. I learned the names of the streets in this neighborhood, and the hours of the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, and the right time of evening to sit on the balcony, when the light on the water turns the particular color that makes you stop, thinking about anything except how beautiful the world still is. I walk every morning now, 2 miles along the river path, sometimes with Patricia, sometimes alone. I have taken a watercolor class, which I am terrible at, and which I enjoy unreasonably. I have started writing letters again, real ones, on paper, with stamps to 3 women I nursed alongside 30 years ago and lost touch with and found again. We write each other long letters about our gardens and our grandchildren and our opinions about things. And we have made plans to meet in Charleston in the fall. My body is 67 years old, and it has its complaints, as all bodies do. My left knee talks to me on cold mornings. I tire faster than I used to, but I wake up in this place that is mine, bought and paid for, known only when I chose to share it, and I drink my coffee, and I look out at the water and I feel Robert's particular kind of quiet approval in the air around me. He gave me this. Not just the condo, not just the money, not just the careful privacy of a plan built over years. He gave me the understanding that a woman's life does not belong to her children, or to her grief, or to anyone who arrives with a brochure and a color-coded spreadsheet about her future. Her life belongs to her. That is not selfishness. That is not cruelty. That is the most fundamental thing. I stayed quiet about the cottage in Savannah for 12 years. I stayed quiet through the family meeting and the spreadsheet and the phone calls about moving the process along. I stayed quiet while they planned and assumed and arranged. And then I simply left for the life I had already built. People ask me sometimes, Patricia asks, mostly, with that particular look she has, whether I regret any of it, whether I wish I had told them sooner, explained more, brought them into the plan. I think about it honestly when she asks, the way you should think about things honestly when someone who loves you is asking. And every time, I arrive at the same place. Robert had a saying he used in the last years. When the good days were getting shorter, he would come in from the tomato garden and wash his hands at the kitchen sink and look out the window at the yard and say quietly, to no one in particular, "Some things only work if you protect them." He was talking about the tomatoes. He was talking about more than the tomatoes. I protected this. And it worked. That is all I have to say about it.